All right, welcome to a definitive look at the deep neurobiology of rest. Today, we're not just looking at sleep as some isolated thing you do at night. We're going to treat the human body as an integrated biological system. We'll explore exactly how sleep architecture, circadian biology, and your autonomic nervous system completely interact to govern your health, your longevity, and your daily performance. So buckle up, because this isn't just about feeling a little more rested. This is a complete masterclass in first principles biology.
Okay, let's dive right into it. For decades, we really just thought of sleep as a passive state, kind of like an off switch for the brain. But what actually happens in that hidden world inside your skull when you lose consciousness? Well, the reality is that sleep is a highly active, biologically aggressive imperative. It's this intricate, non-stop dance of molecular triggers and systemic brain functions that are absolutely essential for survival. And to truly understand this, we have to look at the baseline mechanics of how our bodies even know when it's time to shut down in the first place.
And the absolute foundation of all of this is Bohr-Bailey's two-process model of sleep regulation. It's essentially a biological push and pull that rules your entire life. On one side, we have process S, that's your homeostatic sleep pressure, and it builds up exponentially the longer you stay awake. On the exact opposite side, you have process C, that's your circadian rhythm, a fixed internal clock that promotes alertness completely independent of how tired you actually are. When process S hits its absolute peak and process C dips down to its lowest point, well, that is when the biological gates of sleep finally swing wide open.
To really grasp this push and pull, we've got to zoom all the way into the cellular level. I want you to think of your brain's chemistry as a high-stakes tug of war. On the wake-promoting side, pulling hard, you have neurotransmitters like orexin and histamine. They're keeping you alert, keeping you highly functional. But then, on the sleep-promoting side, we have the heavy hitters pulling back. GABA, which is the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter, and adenosine. Working together, they literally drag the nervous system down into relaxation and, ultimately, deep sleep.
Now, the absolutely crucial piece here is understanding exactly how adenosine works. Looking at this from a first principles perspective, every single time your cells burn energy during the day, they break down ATP. Think of adenosine as the leftover ash from that cellular fire. As this nucleoside continuously piles up in the extracellular space, it binds to inhibitory A1 receptors and excitatory A2A receptors in your basal forebrain. It literally suppresses your wake-promoting networks while simultaneously activating your sleep centers. This right here is process S in physical form. The more energy you burn, the heavier that chemical pressure to sleep becomes.
Section 1. The night shift, mechanism and healing. So let's talk about what the brain is actually doing when it goes offline.
In short, it is performing a massive structural deep clean. When you enter stage N3, or slow-wave deep sleep, your brain fully activates something called the glymphatic system. Driven by synchronized slow-wave electrical activity, these special water channels, called AQP4, located on the brain's astrocytic end feet, polarize. And this is wild. This polarization causes the space around your blood vessels to physically expand. That expansion acts like a valve, allowing a convective flow of cerebral spinal fluid to just rush in and literally wash away metabolic waste. We're talking about aggressively flushing out amyloid beta and tau proteins straight out of the brain parenchyma.
And the stakes involved when this wash system breaks down, they are staggering. According to recent neuroimaging research using the DTI-ALPS index, impaired lymphatic clearance is directly tied to severe, life-altering chronic conditions. If you don't get sufficient deep sleep, that metabolic waste just sits there and gets deposited into your brain tissue. This triggers neuroinflammation, drives cognitive dysfunction, and is heavily linked to both the early onset of neurodegenerative diseases and the severe, debilitating symptoms of myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. Simply put, if the brain cannot wash itself, it poisons itself.
Section 2. The saboteurs. These are the modern habits versus our biology.
Let's start with alcohol. So many people use a nightcap to help them fall asleep, right? Believing it actually helps. But biologically, alcohol acts as a severe biphasic disruptor. In the first half of the night, it mimics GABA. It causes intense sedation, throwing you really quickly into deep sleep, but it aggressively suppresses your REM cycles. But here's the catch. As your liver metabolizes that ethanol in the second half of the night, that GABA sedation drops off a cliff. Your brain literally panics, and it experiences a glutamatergic rebound, basically a massive, intense spike in excitatory stress signals.
And this right here is the true paradox of the nightcap. Sure, you might lose consciousness faster, but you guarantee a biological withdrawal effect that absolutely shreds your systemic recovery. Your sleep architecture fragments.
your autonomic nervous system stresses out, and suddenly you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. with a racing heart, having entirely missed out on the emotionally restorative REM sleep your brain so desperately needed.
Then, of course, we have caffeine, the single most widely consumed psychoactive stimulant on Earth. We all know it keeps us awake, but the actual mechanism? That's what's fascinating. Caffeine is basically a master structural imposter. It perfectly fits right into those A1 and A2A adenosine receptors we talked about earlier. It blocks the actual adenosine from binding, so you aren't actually giving yourself more energy at all. You are just chemically blinding your brain to its own exhaustion. And the research shows that even if you do manage to fall asleep, residual caffeine suppresses those crucial low-frequency delta waves. It keeps your brain in this unnatural, excitation-dominant state that severely weakens that essential glymphatic wash we just went over.
But look, our habits aren't just chemical. They're environmental too. Enter the concept of social jet lag. This is a chronic misalignment between your genetic chronotype, which is your biologically preferred sleep and wake schedule, and the rigid timing imposed by your alarm clock and your daily work schedule. You are essentially forcing your internal process C circadian clock to operate in a totally different time zone than your actual life, without ever even getting on an airplane.
And the metabolic devastation caused by consistently fighting your natural chronotype? It's a cascading disaster. Healthy individuals usually experience a 10% drop in blood pressure at night. Social jet lag and shift work completely strip this protective dipping away, which just skyrockets your cardiovascular risk. We also see elevated systemic inflammatory markers like CRP and IL-6, and massive endocrine dysregulation. The hunger hormones leptin and ghrelin completely misfire. This ramps up your hunger while simultaneously driving insulin resistance and visceral fat deposition. You are fighting millions of years of evolutionary biology. And guess what? Biology always wins.
Section 3. The quantified self, measurement, and resolution. Let's look at the data.
We live in the era of the quantified self now, right? We all rely on these health wearables to track our sleep architecture, but you have to ask, how accurate is that data on your wrist? When we actually look at sleep staging accuracy, which is measured in a statistical metric called Cohen's kappa, there's a massive dissonance in the research. Studies funded by the manufacturers? Yeah, they often put their own devices right at the top. But when we look at independent clinical trials, like the 2025 Antwerp study conducted without any industry funding, the whole hierarchy shifts. In the truly independent data, the Apple Watch Series 8 surprisingly leads with moderate accuracy. That's followed by Fitbit, while the legacy Garmin algorithms really seem to struggle heavily with accurate sleep staging.
So the crucial point here is understanding exactly what these numbers mean for you on a practical level. Take deep sleep detection as an example. The Apple Watch has a sensitivity of just 50.7% for deep sleep in independent testing, essentially a coin toss. In fact, clinical data shows it regularly underestimates your true deep sleep by up to 43 minutes a single night.
And this brings us to a really universal truth about consumer wearables. They use highly conservative algorithms. When the sensors are even slightly unsure if you are awake, in deep sleep, or in REM, they just default to categorizing it as light sleep. Naturally, this massively inflates your light sleep totals across the board. The big takeaway? Your data is incredibly useful for spotting long-term behavioral trends, for sure, but it is absolutely not flawless medical truth. So please, don't panic if your wearable says you got 0 deep sleep last night. It very likely just defaulted to a conservative estimate.
However, there are specific areas where these devices actually excel. When it comes to tracking your nocturnal heart rate variability and your resting heart rate, which are really the ultimate metrics of autonomic nervous system recovery and vagal tone, the Oura Ring Gen 4 achieved a near-perfect correlation of 0.99 when compared to clinical ECGs. If your primary goal is monitoring exactly how your nervous system is recovering from daily stress, certain form factors simply dominate the field.
But let's contrast that resting data with your active data, because once you get out of bed and actually start moving around, the rankings flip entirely. The Apple Watch strongly dominates active heart rate tracking at over 86% accuracy, as well as blood oxygen metrics. It heavily outperforms the smart rings in this category, mainly because rings really struggle with movement artifacts on your fingers. The point is, there's no single device that wins everywhere. It's all about aligning the specific technology with the exact biological metric you are trying to optimize. So we've journeyed all the way from the molecular buildup of adenosine right through the brainwashing glymphatic system to the precise ways our modern habits and environments fracture our ancient biological clocks. Sleep isn't an absence of wakefulness. It's a highly orchestrated, fiercely protective performance of survival. So I'll leave you with this one thought. Knowing the incredibly deep, intricate neurobiology that's going to happen inside your brain tonight, how will you look at your wearable data differently tomorrow morning?